The moment you give the wrong thing away, something invisible closes. Not in the world you can see, but in the world that decides whether money stays, whether opportunities return, and whether blessing multiplies or quietly drains away. There are gifts that look generous, kind, even loving. Yet, in the spiritual realm, they act like open doors for loss. And once those doors are opened, people spend years wondering why nothing ever settles. Why abundance passes through their hands but never remains. What you are about to hear is not modern motivation, and it is not superstition. It is an ancient warning preserved by rabbinic wisdom, whispered across generations, and guarded carefully by those who understood how blessing truly works. Before we go any further, I want to ask you to do something meaningful. If this kind of wisdom matters to you, if you value teachings that come from ancient sources and speak to real life, subscribe now to the Jewish Wisdom channel. Your subscription is not just a click. It is a way of supporting the continuation of teachings that were never meant to be forgotten. Now, I want to anchor your heart in the right place. Write this short phrase in the comments, slowly and intentionally. My blessings are protected. Do not rush it. Words shape awareness, and awareness shapes reality. There is a reason this teaching comes wrapped in urgency. In Jewish thought, giving is one of the highest virtues. Charity, generosity, sharing, these are sacred acts. But the sages were very clear about one thing. Not everything should be given, and not everything should leave your possession. Some objects carry spiritual weight. Some items absorb intention, history, struggle, and even decree spoken over them in moments of pain or lack. When such things are passed on carelessly, the transfer is not neutral. Something moves with them. The Torah teaches that blessing is not random. In Deuteronomy it says that blessing rests where order, intention, and obedience align. In Proverbs, wisdom warns that wealth gained or lost, without understanding, brings sorrow instead of peace. And the rabbis expanded on this, with a principle that sounds simple, but cuts deep. What you release without discernment, you release with its spiritual consequences. Many people believe poverty is only about numbers, salaries, or bad luck. But in Jewish spiritual language, poverty begins long before the wallet. It begins when channels are disrupted, when vessels crack, when a person unknowingly breaks spiritual boundaries that were meant to protect flow. There were objects in ancient homes that were never loaned, never gifted, never casually discarded. Not because they were magical, but because they were considered vessels, containers of energy, intention, and memory. The Talmud discusses how certain items become bound to a person's mazal, their spiritual current. To remove them improperly was to disturb that current. This is why the wealthy sages were not careless givers. They were generous, yes, but they were precise. They understood that true giving increases light only when it is aligned with wisdom. Blind generosity, without discernment, can paradoxically create spiritual leaks. Think about how many times people give something away to get rid of it. A gift offered with relief instead of blessing. An object passed on with a silent thought. I don't want this energy anymore. The soul hears those thoughts. The spiritual world responds to them. In the book of Genesis, we are told that Isaac blessed Jacob intentionally, with awareness, with direction. Blessing was never accidental. It was spoken, guided, and protected. When blessings were misplaced, confusion followed. When they were guarded, generations prospered. This teaching has survived because it works. Families who ignored it often noticed patterns they could not explain. Money entering and leaving quickly. Constant emergencies. Generosity that never returned multiplied. And a strange heaviness after certain exchanges. Meanwhile, those who practiced discernment experienced stability, continuity, and what the sages called minushat hanefesh, peace of provision. What makes this knowledge powerful is not fear, but clarity. You are not being told to stop giving. You are being invited to give wisely, consciously, and in alignment with laws older than modern economics. There are 6 specific types of gifts that the rabbis warned about. Items that should never be passed on casually because they act like spiritual siphons. They do not look dangerous. They often look harmless. But once you understand their nature, you will never see generosity the same way again. For now, let this settle in you. Not everything that leaves your hand should leave your life. Some things were meant to be transformed, not transferred. Some things must be closed, not shared. And some losses people call financial were actually spiritual decisions made long before the numbers appeared. Stay present. The wisdom that follows was not designed to scare you, but to protect what was always meant to remain with you. There is an ancient principle woven through the Torah and echoed by the prophets that most people read, but very few truly hear. Blessing attaches itself to vessels. In Hebrew thought, blessing is not abstract. It rests, dwells, abides. It chooses places, objects, rhythms, and people. This is why the Torah does not speak of blessing as an emotion, but as a presence. When something becomes a vessel for blessing, it carries more than material value. It carries alignment. In Genesis, when Abraham was blessed, the text does not say only that he became wealthy. It says that he was blessed in everything. The rabbis pause on that phrase. In everything implies continuity. Nothing leaked, nothing slipped away. The flow remained intact, because the vessels were guarded. The sages taught that certain objects absorb the spiritual state of their owner over time. This is not mysticism detached from scripture. It is a direct extension of biblical logic. When Jacob placed stones under his head and slept, those stones became witnesses. When the ark rested in the house of Obed-Edom, his household prospered, not because of gold inside the ark, but because of what it carried. Objects are not neutral in the biblical worldview. They participate. In Jewish tradition, the home is called a mikdash mi'at, a small sanctuary. What enters it and what leaves it matters. The book of Proverbs says that wisdom builds the house, but folly tears it down with its own hands. The rabbis understood this literally and spiritually. Giving away certain items without discernment was seen as tearing small holes in the structure that holds blessing. The Talmud speaks about tools of livelihood, garments associated with dignity, vessels used daily, and items that accompanied a person through hardship. These were not to be given away lightly. Why? Because they were bound to a person's spiritual labor. Sweat, prayer, worry, hope, all of it leaves an imprint. When such items are transferred casually, the imprint transfers too. This is where many people misunderstand generosity. In Jewish law, charity is sacred, but it is never chaotic. The highest form of giving, tzedakah, is structured, intentional, and protective. It elevates both the giver and the receiver. But when giving becomes a way to discard, escape, or detach from one's own history, it stops being elevation and starts becoming leakage. The rabbis taught that poverty often begins when a person unknowingly sends away their own vessels. Not money itself, but the channels through which money was meant to arrive. This is why some people work endlessly and never stabilize. They are sowing, but the soil has been disturbed. There is a verse in Haggai where God says, "You earn wages," only to put them into a bag with holes. The commentators ask, what creates the holes? The answer given is misalignment actions that break spiritual order while appearing harmless on the surface. Giving the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong person is one of those actions. Rabbinic wisdom identifies 6 categories of gifts that should never be given casually. Each one corresponds to a different spiritual channel: provision, dignity, continuity, protection, identity, and peace. When these are transferred without awareness, the person may feel generous in the moment, but weakened over time. This teaching was never meant to create fear or selfishness. On the contrary, it was meant to protect abundance, so that generosity could continue sustainably. The wealthy sages were not afraid to give, they were afraid to give wrongly. There is also a deeper layer. In Hebrew, the word for gift, matana, shares a root with preparation. A true gift is prepared spiritually before it is released. If preparation is missing, the gift becomes a transfer of imbalance rather than blessing. Think about how often people give things away after arguments, during financial stress, or while feeling overwhelmed. Those emotional states infuse the object. The spiritual world recognizes intention more than appearance. This is why 2 identical acts can produce opposite results depending on the inner posture of the giver. King Solomon wrote that the blessing of the Lord brings wealth and adds no sorrow with it. The rabbis explained that sorrow appears when wealth is gained or lost through broken vessels. Blessing without sorrow requires boundaries. What you are receiving now is not a list yet, but a lens, a way of seeing. Once this lens is in place, the 6 warnings will not sound strange, they will feel obvious. You will recognize patterns in your own life, moments where something shifted after a certain exchange, a certain gift, a certain release. This is ancient wisdom because it had to survive time to prove itself. It was passed quietly, often from father to son, from teacher to student, because it only works when handled with respect. Let this revelation settle. You are not learning how to hold tightly. You are learning how to hold wisely. And wisdom, in the Jewish tradition, is always the beginning of lasting prosperity. When ancient wisdom moves from understanding into daily life, it becomes protection. This teaching was never meant to remain theoretical. In Jewish thought, wisdom that is not applied becomes dormant, and dormant wisdom does not guard blessing. What you are about to integrate now is where many people unknowingly change the direction of their lives, not by dramatic actions, but by small, conscious adjustments that restore order to spiritual flow. The first application begins with awareness. Before giving anything away, pause. In Hebrew tradition, pause is sacred. The Sabbath itself is a pause that restores blessing to the 6 days of labor. When you pause before an act of giving, you are not hesitating, you are aligning. Ask yourself, not emotionally, but spiritually, what role did this object play in my life? Was it present during struggle? Was it tied to work, identity, dignity, or provision? Did it accompany a season where you prayed for breakthrough? These questions awaken discernment. The rabbis taught that discernment precedes generosity. Without it, giving becomes reactionary. With it, giving becomes elevation. There is a difference between giving as an overflow and giving as an escape. Overflow multiplies. Escape drains. Many people give things away when they are tired, frustrated, or seeking relief. Jewish wisdom gently corrects this by saying, never let exhaustion make spiritual decisions for you. Another practical application is intention. Before giving, speak inwardly, not loudly, not theatrically, but with clarity. In the Psalms, David constantly aligns action with intention. He does not move first and reflect later. When you choose to give something that is appropriate to give, silently dedicate the act as a blessing, not a release. Say within yourself that what leaves your hand leaves with peace, not with burden. Intention seals the act. This is also where boundaries matter. Boundaries are not walls, they are vessels. In Proverbs, wisdom says she builds her house with 7 pillars. Pillars support structure. When you decide certain items are not to be given, you are not being selfish, you are reinforcing pillars that hold blessing steady. Jewish homes historically had clear rules about what could be shared, loaned, donated, or discarded. These rules protected continuity across generations. Apply this teaching also to receiving. Do not accept everything that is offered. The same wisdom that governs giving governs receiving. The sages warned that accepting certain items from people in chaos can invite that chaos into your own space. This is not judgment, it is spiritual hygiene. Just as you would not bring spoiled food into your kitchen, you should not bring spiritually burdened items into your home. Now, anchor this teaching with words. Write this phrase in the comments with intention and calm. I give with wisdom and I keep my blessing intact. This is not for the algorithm. It is for alignment. As you live this out, you may notice subtle changes. Fewer leaks, less urgency. A sense that what comes into your life stays longer. Opportunities no longer feel rushed. Expenses stop appearing out of nowhere. These are signs not of luck, but of restored order. In Jewish spirituality, order is mercy in action. There is also a daily practice the sages recommended: gratitude for what remains. Blessing grows where appreciation dwells. Each morning, acknowledge one thing that has stayed with you: a skill, a tool, a relationship, a source of provision. Gratitude reinforces vessels. Complaining fractures them. This is why the Israelites lost stability in the desert, not because of lack, but because of constant murmuring. The land of promise required a different inner posture. Now, let me speak directly to your support, because wisdom survives through partnership. And if you like content like this, and you want to support us so we can continue bringing more teachings like this, below this video, there is a thank you button. If you are able to contribute, we would be truly grateful. Your support allows this ancient wisdom to remain alive and accessible. Understand this: every act of conscious support mirrors the very principle you are learning. Intentional giving, aligned with value, strengthens both the giver and the receiver. That is true. As you continue applying this teaching, resist extremes. Do not become fearful of generosity, and do not become careless with it. The middle path, the path of wisdom, is where blessing rests. The rabbis often said that wealth flees extremes but follows balance. Over time, this practice reshapes how you see objects, money, and exchange itself. You stop seeing things as disposable and start seeing them as participants in your life's story. Some chapters are meant to close. Others are meant to remain as foundations. Wisdom is knowing the difference. This is not about hoarding. It is about honoring what carried you, honoring what served you, honoring what absorbed your prayers. When you do this, the spiritual world responds with stability. And stability is the soil where abundance grows without anxiety. Let this teaching move with you. Let it slow you down. let it refine your generosity. Because when giving is guided by wisdom, blessing does not diminish, it deepens, strengthens, and endures. There is a story told quietly among the sages about a man who never understood why his life felt unstable. Even though he worked hard, gave generously, and prayed faithfully. His income arrived, but it never settled. His home was always one step away from peace, but never quite there. He believed the problem was outside of him, the economy, people, timing. Only much later did he realize the pattern began years earlier with small, well-intentioned decisions he never questioned. During a season of hardship, this man gave away objects that had carried him through his struggle. Tools he worked with every day, clothing he wore when he rebuilt himself, items he associated with survival, dignity, and effort. He gave them away quickly, telling himself he was being noble. But inwardly, what he was really saying was, "I want this season gone." He did not bless the release. He erased it. Jewish wisdom teaches that when you erase your past instead of redeeming it, the soul feels unsafe to build a future. Blessing hesitates where memory is dishonored. The Torah never tells us to forget the desert. It tells us to remember it properly. Even Egypt is remembered, not to relive pain, but to recognize what was transformed. In the book of Ruth, Naomi returns empty, believing everything has been lost. But Ruth stays. Ruth represents continuity, the refusal to abandon what still carries life. From that continuity comes restoration, lineage, and eventually kingship. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was discarded in despair. Everything was redeemed through alignment. This is where the emotional depth of this teaching reveals itself. Many people are not blocked because they lack generosity, but because they lack reconciliation with their own journey. They give away reminders of who they were, instead of honoring how far they have come. And the soul, sensing instability, holds back its trust. When you begin to apply discernment, something shifts inside you. You stop rushing to detach. You start choosing to consecrate. Items tied to struggle become testimonies instead of burdens. You no longer see them as weight, but as proof that blessing sustained you even when resources were thin. This is deeply human. We all want relief. We all want a clean break from pain. But ancient wisdom gently says, do not amputate what can be healed. Do not discard what can be elevated. Blessing multiplies when the soul feels respected. If this message is touching something real inside you, take a moment and answer honestly in the comments. Write just one word that describes what you are feeling right now: peace, clarity, conviction, hope, or awakening. Your response is not for anyone else. It is an acknowledgement to yourself. Faith, in the Jewish tradition, is never passive. It is not an abstract belief, not a comforting idea reserved for moments of crisis. Faith is movement. Faith is posture. Faith is the courage to align daily actions with invisible truth. From the earliest pages of the Torah, faith is shown through deeds. Abraham walks, Noah builds, Moses stretches out his staff, Ruth remains. Faith always expresses itself in what a person does with what has been placed in their hands. The action revealed here is not dramatic, but it is profoundly powerful. Begin treating what surrounds you as sacred territory. Not sacred in a theatrical or mystical sense, but sacred in the original biblical meaning: set apart, intentional, ordered, and respected. In Hebrew thought, holiness begins with boundaries. God himself creates order before he creates abundance. Light is separated from darkness, waters from land, purpose from chaos. Only after order is established does life multiply. When you treat your environment, your home, your tools, your possessions, your routines, as territory entrusted to you, something shifts internally. You stop living as if everything is temporary and disposable. You stop acting as though tomorrow is uncertain and must be forced. Instead, you begin to steward. Stewardship tells the soul, this place is safe. And when the soul feels safe, it allows blessing to rest. Order is deeply misunderstood in modern life. Many confuse it with rigidity, control, or lack of freedom. But biblical order is the opposite. Order is what allows freedom to endure. Without order, abundance overwhelms. Without order, generosity collapses into exhaustion. Without order, prosperity comes quickly and leaves even faster. This is why the sages taught that disorder repels blessing. Not because God withholds, but because blessing needs structure to remain. Imagine pouring water onto open ground instead of into a vessel. The water is not lacking. The problem is containment. When order returns, flow follows naturally, without force. Applying this wisdom means slowing down enough to notice. Notice what you allow into your space. Notice what you give away, and why. Notice whether your actions come from peace, or from pressure. Pressure is not a spiritual guide. Peace is. The rabbis taught that the divine presence rests where there is peace, not haste. As you practice this, your life begins to speak a different language to the spiritual world. Instead of signaling urgency, fear, or instability, you signal readiness. And readiness is magnetic. Opportunities respond to readiness. Provision responds to readiness. Relationships respond to readiness. If you are enjoying this theme, and you feel that something inside you is awakening, not excitement, but clarity, then know that this journey does not end with understanding alone. There is a depth to this wisdom that unfolds layer by layer, with guidance meant to be lived, not merely heard. That is why we prepared a complimentary resource designed precisely for this moment. The Jewish Wisdom ebook expands these principles carefully and responsibly. It brings practical guidance, rooted in ancient sources, explained in a way that speaks to real life, to homes, work, finances, decisions, and seasons of transition. This ebook was not created to overwhelm you with information, but to walk with you as you apply wisdom gradually, consciously, and with peace. If this teaching resonates with you and you feel called to go deeper, you can access the ebook through the link available in the description of this video. Take your time. Return to it when you are ready. Wisdom works best when it is received calmly, not consumed quickly. Let this truth now seal itself within you, not as an idea, but as an inner agreement. Blessing is not fragile, but it is responsive. It responds to honor. It responds to intention. It responds to wisdom. Blessing withdraws from chaos, not as punishment, but as protection. And it returns the moment alignment is restored. When you stop giving away your foundations, your dignity, your order, your discernment, the future no longer feels threatening. It feels safe enough to arrive slowly, steadily, and completely. Anxiety loosens its grip. Urgency softens. Trust replaces tension. May your hands give with discernment, never from fear and never from pressure. May your home hold peace, not as an absence of struggle, but as the presence of order. May what enters your life remain long enough to grow roots, bear fruit, and multiply beyond you. And may you walk forward with wisdom, not rushing, not withholding, but stewarding every step with intention and quiet strength. Ancient wisdom does not rush to conclude. It circles, it returns, it integrates. In the Hebrew way of seeing the world, the end is not a stopping point, it is a confirmation. What you have received here is not about fear of poverty, nor about obsession with objects. It is about alignment. It is about restoring respect for the invisible structures that hold your life together when no one is watching. There is a quiet law that runs through the Torah, the prophets, the writings, and even echoes through the teachings later affirmed in the New Testament. What you honor, honors you back. Jesus himself spoke in continuity with this wisdom when he said that those who are faithful in little are entrusted with much. Faithfulness, in the biblical sense, is not only moral, it is relational. It is how you relate to time, to work, to resources, to memory, and to meaning. When you treat your life as disposable, life responds with instability. When you treat your life as sacred territory, blessing finds a place to rest. Many people ask why abundance feels elusive. They pray, they work, they hope, yet something remains unsettled. Jewish wisdom answers gently but firmly. Abundance avoids chaos, not effort. It avoids disorder, not struggle. The Israelites were fed in the desert, but they were not established there. Establishment required structure, boundaries, and reverence for what sustains life. This is why the sages never separated the spiritual from the practical. How you store, how you give, how you discard, how you receive, all of it participates in the same spiritual economy. Nothing exists in isolation. Every action sends a signal. There is a verse in Ecclesiastes that says the end of a matter is better than its beginning, because wisdom has had time to settle. You are now at that point. Not because you have been given a list, but because you have been given a posture, a way of standing in the world with awareness instead of impulse. From this posture, generosity becomes clean. Giving no longer feels like loss. Keeping no longer feels like fear. Everything finds its place. This is the state the rabbis called shalom, not the absence of problems, but the presence of order. Order is deeply compassionate. It removes anxiety. It tells the soul that tomorrow is not a threat. When the soul feels safe, creativity awakens. When creativity awakens, new channels open. And when channels open, provision follows without force. This is why so many people experience sudden clarity after applying ancient wisdom. Not necessarily sudden money, but sudden peace. And peace is not the opposite of ambition. It is the foundation of sustainable growth. Wealth that arrives without peace never stays. Wealth that arrives into peace multiplies. If there is one thing to carry forward, let it be this: do not rush spiritual decisions. Speed belongs to fear. Wisdom moves at a measured pace. Before releasing anything from your life, whether an object, a habit, or a season, pause long enough to honor what it represented. Bless it properly. Close it intentionally. The spiritual world responds to closure as much as it responds to faith. You may notice, in the days ahead, that you feel more grounded, less impulsive, more present. These are not coincidences. They are signs that internal order is returning. When internal order returns, external reality reorganizes itself around it. If this message resonated with you on a personal level, take a moment and write in the comments a simple, honest response to this question. What is one thing in your life you now see with more respect than before? There is no right answer, only awareness. Let this be the final seal over everything you have received. You are not meant to live in survival mode. You are not meant to chase what leaks away. You are meant to steward blessing with wisdom, dignity, and peace. And remember, ancient wisdom was never meant to impress you. It was meant to protect you. Walk forward slowly, give carefully, keep wisely, and may what enters your life find a home where it can remain, grow, and bless many others.